This is We the Sales Engineers Podcast, Show 19. Let's discover stuff.
Welcome to We the SEs Podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers with your host, Ramsey Majaba. Although every day is special and we are so thankful to be so blessed in life, today is extra special because it's Ramsey's birthday. Please join us in celebrating his birthday and wishing him a wonderful day. Hope you enjoy the show.
Happy birthday, Daddy. Love you, Daddy.
Hello, SE Nation and folks on the interwebs. Thank you guys for being here today. And I believe you just witnessed my son with the cutest voice ever wishing me a happy birthday. So my happy birthday is on the 26th. You listen to this on the 27th. I just wanted to thank my wife and Caso for taking the time and to do this. They know how public shows of affection embarrass me, so she decided to do this. My wife decided to do this, but I really appreciate it anyways, because I don't know, I just do. Anyways, enough dilly-dallying. Today's guest is Tim O'Connor. You've heard me talk about a few books, one of which being the New Solution Selling book. Tim owns a company called Uptrend Partners, and he actually provides training based on that book. So he's affiliated with a company called Sales Performance International. You'll find the links to Tim's company and Sales Performance International on the show notes at wethesalesengineers.com/show19. And this was a sales-based training, so it's not an SE training. It's for salespeople, but I believe every SE should actually attend one of those trainings just to understand better what actually is the salesperson's role and what they should be doing. That way, everybody's on the same page. We all have the same goal, and every sales engineer should have some sales skills, a lot of sales skills. Like, they should be a salesperson light with the technical spin to it. So enough dilly-dallying. Let's jump right into the show. Hey, Tim, welcome to the show.
Hey, good morning. How you been?
I just came back from vacation, and I'm really confused about who I am this morning. But other than that, I'm pretty good.
I like it. Travel disorientation. I like that.
Yeah, well, we drove it's supposed to be a 5-hour drive, but with a 5-month-old, it took around 9 hours. So, how about you?
Bless you. That's a tough one.
It's
hey,
not bad.
Been great. As a matter of fact, I actually was in Quebec City a couple months ago with a client, so not Ottawa, but at least getting up into Canada again, and I think I'll be going to Toronto next month. So finally expanding into Canada.
Nice. Congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
So, all right, speaking of clients, maybe we can explain who you are and what you do for a living.
Absolutely. So my name is Tim O'Connor. I have my own company called Uptrend Partners. I live in Louisville, Kentucky. But as you know, I'm affiliated with a much larger organization called Sales Performance International. So I spend all of my time doing sales training, sales enablement, sales management training, things of that nature. And honestly, that's how you and I, come to meet one another and work together.
Yeah, I took one of your courses along with my company based on the solution selling methodology, and that was an awesome training. I would recommend it to whoever is interested in getting some training. It is more targeted for salespeople, but as SEs, a lot of things we do is common with what salespeople do. So I learned a lot from it.
Correct.
All right. So you do training, you work with customers, but you also sell your course, right? So you're also a salesperson.
Correct.
Great.
Absolutely.
All right. So I wanted to discuss with you more about the discovery process, right? Because I feel,
sure,
for the first couple of years of my career, my discovery process was, what do you call it? Spray and pray, where I come up with a slide deck and just go through it, and then, is this interesting for you? No? Okay, well, is this interesting for you? No? All right. So maybe you can explain to the folks what's the best process that you believe in on how to prepare initially for a discovery call.
Okay, so I think it's important to consider the role of an SE, and I think as you know, there's a point within a process where you fit in. and you always don't have to be on the front end of the opportunity. But coming back to discovery, which you refer to as spray and pray, we also call show up and throw up. And the dilemma there is we prepare our wonderful 150 slide deck and basically tell the customer, hey, stop me when you see something you're interested in. That's not going to work very well. It means we haven't done our homework. It means our company's done a poor job, preparing us to get in front of that customer. Because if we're doing that, then fundamentally we've missed something before we ever got there. So I think call preparation, being ready for that meeting is very important. And I would almost turn it back to you and say, you've been through the course. When you think about the role as SE, what was your number one takeaway from that course? That helped you get better.
The number one takeaway from that course is, and now I talk about it all the time as if it's my idea, but it's from the course. It's helping the customer build their own vision to see how they can use something. Okay. So, yeah.
Yeah, and
go ahead.
So let's talk about that vision, because that's hugely important. So, for your listeners, if you step back for a moment as your listener individually is hearing us talk, think back to the last time you purchased a car or a house. And so you went about that search for that car or that house, and eventually you determined what you need, either the number of bedrooms or location or the type of car. And, you've got a family, I want an SUV now, whatever it may be, but you establish your needs. And then eventually you go out and you visit the potential places to live, or you drive the cars. At some point, if you think back to it, your present home that you live in or the car that you're driving, there was a moment in time where you knew before you purchased it, whether it was on the test drive or the walkthrough of the house, you knew it was going to be yours. And that's what we call vision of usage. That moment in time where you haven't bought it yet, but you can see your future and how this is going to be your future. And I think that's what you're talking about. How do we do that for the customer, either in a tangible or an intangible way? So, kind of following up with that, I'm actually going to turn this back to you and ask you a question. Can you think of a time recently where, what did you change that you were doing before that you're doing now to help customers get vision based on what you learned?
Based on what I learned? All right. Well, I'm doing a lot of things differently. It comes from like the preparation stage where, let's say my account manager calls me and tells me, hey, we need to talk to this customer. This is what they're doing today. So I then go look up the customer, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's their website company, and try to figure out what we can do to help them. I'm no longer thinking in terms of products. I'm thinking in terms of solutions of what problems they can have that we can solve for them, whether they're aware of it or not.
Okay.
And then when I meet the customer, I feel like you're interviewing me, but this is good. When I meet the customer, I start asking questions and making them think about, hey, you're doing it this way. If there was another way to do it that was faster, saves you more money, saves you more time, whatever it is that beneficial for you? And then and if they say yes, then I follow up with how would it be beneficial for you? So,
excellent.
Yeah, I learned that from you.
So usually well, thank you. Well, what we usually see is that, so you make this transition from selling products to solving problems. And that problem has, if you think about, and I know in your marketplace, for instance, you might call on an IT director, it might be a QA manager, project manager. Every one of those titles, we all go out, we call on, we're limited when you think about it to usually 8 titles or less that we interact with. And if we think about that title and consider, what does that person get hired to do? What are they measured upon? What are their metrics? And you know what? If they don't measure up over a prolonged period of time, what could they potentially lose their job for? So that's the hired, measured, and fired things. We call that, for training terms, pains. And if we can relate those pains that they have to live with on a daily basis and how we can help to resolve those pains, we're kind of now talking a language that really resonates with them. Because that's where, making sales is an emotional connection. We back it up with logic. But to make that emotional link and connection with that potential customer, you really have to step into their shoes and look at the pains that they're experiencing, and then relate, how our product, might be able to resolve those issues for them. Because that's where they can see a vision of a future where their present set of problems begins to go away. And I think that hopefully articulates a little bit of what we talked about in training when you went through the class.
It does. I want to step back. So I mentioned how I prepare for discovery call. How would you recommend folks prepare for a discovery call? Is there a best method?
I think there is. I think it's all about preparation, and I think that's in everything you do. One of the people I hold out as an example in the world, because most people are familiar, is Tom Brady, the football player. Pretty much everyone in North America has heard of the guy. But when you think about what he does as a profession, he plays professional football. Those games that he plays on Sundays, there's only 60 minutes. He's an offensive player. So he only plays football for 30 minutes a Sunday, and the NFL has a 16-game season. So literally, Tom Brady never performs football for more than 8 hours in a season. But then if you begin to think about, all right, that's his performance time, just like our performance time is when we're actually face-to-face with a customer, what's the ratio of preparation to performance that a guy like Tom Brady puts in his profession? And then we have to come back and look at hours and say, hey, if I've got a 1 hour meeting with a client, tomorrow afternoon, did I at least prepare for an hour? Doing research and things like that. Preferably, maybe it's a 2 or 3 to 1 ratio of preparation to performance. So I think some best practices would be, what connections, what understanding of this individual's problems or this company's problems do we have? What other groundwork has been done by other members of our company to help us discover that information as we head in, and make sure that we're tailoring everything that we do that's going to resonate with them for their issues. And then another aside is, I really like LinkedIn. LinkedIn can show you a lot of things if you are LinkedIn with them, if not, just as a reconnaissance tool, to go see if there are any of our current customers that they may have gone to school with or worked with in the past. Any common connections that we can find, I think is very helpful before I go see someone.
Okay, if I were to play devil's advocate, which I like to do on these calls, let's say I'm an account manager and you're telling me to prepare for an hour for every hour meeting that I have. I'm going to tell you I don't have time. For that hour that I'm preparing for it, I could be meeting another customer, closing a deal. What do you say to folks that say that?
Well, so it's very rare I come in contact with people that have a full pipeline. I mean, God love those that can. But the reality is most of us, if we have a full pipeline, the pipeline's usually not filled with qualified opportunities. So I would say first and foremost, I would need to look at the pipeline to justify a statement like that. Are you really that busy doing things that are that important to building business? Because I think we can find busy work for ourselves to do quite often that in fact shouldn't be prioritized as much as preparing for the business development meetings that we've got coming up. Because those, at the end of the day, not only are they most important to us, but if we don't hit sales numbers and we don't drive revenue, there are people in our companies are going to lose their jobs. It might be us, but everyone in the company is dependent upon us to go out and find revenue. I mean, every role within the company depends on us.
I like that they use the term busy work. A lot of us get sucked into that, where we're just doing busy work, like answering an email or whatever it is that we end up doing. But yeah, I agree with you. But have you had this conversation with AMs or SEs who keep saying, well, no, I have to do this, I have to do that, versus I have to prepare for a call?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, you've got to prioritize your activities. And, where does this fit into your priorities? I mean, is building the business and landing new business a number one priority? I think it comes down to how do you personally get measured in your job? What are you responsible for? And if this is not a metric that is highly important, then maybe it's not a metric that you try to achieve. But generally speaking, I think most most companies that I know of that have the account managers and SEs, they both have some responsibility to land the new business and expand existing business.
So if you're measured activities versus closed sales, then by all means do busy work. If you're measured by closed sales, prepare for a freaking meeting. Does that sound?
If you're measured by busy work, then by golly, you better do busy work, right? To hit those metrics so you keep your job. But I would say if you're measured by busy work, then your company probably has an issue.
Yeah. No, I agree. I like that. All right, so we prepared for a discovery meeting, whether it's through LinkedIn, website. We know now the importance of preparing. Hopefully, everybody knew from before, but we just reinforced it.
But you carefully step back to that for a second, because I think there's one other thing I'd like to talk about.
Sure.
As you prepare for a discovery meeting, that's also crucial. Depending on the role that you have, but many of us find ourselves in situations where we're interacting with customers on a one-to-one basis, or it's us and maybe two or three from the other side. So if you find yourself in situations, and this is just the best business practice, even if you're not just one-on-one, but particularly one-on-ones, you need to prepare a list of diagnostic questions. So what are the questions that we would want to ask this potential client? So I would, as a best practice, always prepare at least 10 questions before that meeting. And those are not yes or no questions. Those are open-ended discovery questions, things like who, what, when, where, why, so that you can learn more about how they're doing business today. As you get in the heat of the moment, all of us do this. We're in front of the customer, and there's an exchange going back and forth. It is very easy to just follow the conversation, which we want to do. But if you don't have a prepared list of questions to refer back to, it's quite easy to leave that customer or hang up that call and realize that, oh my goodness, I wish I'd asked that question. I forgot to do that, and it prevents us from making those mistakes if we prepare a good list of questions. And it also forces us to channel our thinking about what is the information we're trying to gain or convey in this meeting. So I hope that helps.
No, it does. It's happened to me before, where we get sucked into a conversation and then I forget like how many what's the bandwidth you want to use. It's a stupid question, simple question, easy question. You just take it for granted sometimes. So I agree with you. All right. So, but okay, here's a question. I hear a lot of feedback about customers who think people who have questions written down in front of them ahead of time as amateurs, others who think of them as prepared. Do you have a opinion about that fact, or about those opinions?
I absolutely do. I think it's, what are the questions? The quality of the questions determines the impression that the customer has. As SEs, in many ways, you're subject matter experts. So asking irrelevant questions, I think, would reflect poorly. But I think, one of the things that we talk about as well is one of the benefits that most people in your role have is they work with more than one customer. So they get to see how things are done in multiple businesses. And then if you think about your client or potential customers, they're in that one silo. They really only get to see how things are done at their business. So you should, just by virtue of the exposure to more businesses and more issues and more problems, be able to come to them from a consulting position. And that's more of a, hey, in other companies we've seen, some issues around A or B. I'm curious, what's your opinion? Does that affect you in any way? And again, notice I didn't say, is that going on here? I asked them, what's their opinion? Because the idea of asking an opinion, every human being is more than happy to share their opinion. When there's a saying about opinions, it's like a certain body part, and everybody has one. But that allows your customer to open up to you and say, hey, here's my thoughts on that, or no, that doesn't happen here with our company. We have a different issue. But at least you guide them down the path of opening up to you by showing a little bit of expertise on your own part.
Okay, that's cool. All right, so if we move into the discovery call, could you explain initially to the folks like what happens at a discovery call or what it is?
So a discovery call is really about unearthing. First thing we need to discover what the pains or critical business issues are that exist today prior to offering any form of solution. So this is where you do the show up and throw up. If you go in and you just take your slide deck and start, hey, stop me when you see something you like, that's not very interactive, and your customer's going to get bored pretty quickly. So before we ever show them a slide deck or talk about a product, we really need to do some diagnosis about what their situation is, what's going on there, what's causing it, before we try to align a solution to it. So I think it's very, very important that we take our time in discovery prior to doing a demo or offering up a slide deck or any of that. Or if we're going to offer up a slide deck, then one of the very first slides should be, we work with other IT directors. We commonly hear these, 3 or 4 problems. What are your thoughts on that? Just remember that the most important thing we have to do is identify a pain before we can do anything else. If we don't have some kind of business issue on the table, we're wasting their time and probably wasting our time.
So how does one identify a pain?
So if you come back, pain is something, again, that individual is hired, measured, and fired potentially for. So if I'm an IT director and I've got increasing capital expenditure spendings, that might be a problem for me. If I've got increasing IT operating costs for a variety of reasons, that might also be a problem. If I've got network inadequacies, just to name some things that you might be able to relate to. But those are things that we need to identify. If we can identify one of those things is going on, then we have an opportunity to explore into that, and ask the questions. All right, so you mentioned you've got some network inadequacies. What do you think is causing that? And then you can drill down into those issues further as they share information with you. So that's my suggestion. It's all got to be pain related to that title.
So I was talking to a friend, and we were having this discussion where a potential customer, all he cares about is network reliability. So what they end up doing is buying the biggest link that they can. So instead of a 2-lane highway, for example, they're buying a 10-lane highway.
Okay.
Right. And they don't care if they're paying X amount extra because it's reliable. So if I were to talk to him, I wouldn't know how to sell that guy anything because he's solving his problem in the most inefficient way possible. But for him, his pain is solved. Is there a method?
So then,
go ahead.
Yeah. So there's a method in it, and it comes back to a concept that we call re-engineering. So he's got a vision, and the vision is, I'm just going to buy the biggest highway I can. It's going to have, I'm going to buy a 20-lane highway, and I'm going to assume I'm not going to have any traffic congestion. So I think the question is, how do you see yourself using that? What do you hope to accomplish by doing so? And that'll begin to give you some glimpse into, what is it and why is it? Because what you don't understand is you don't understand at that point what was the pain that caused them to want to buy the superhighway. There's a problem there, and we don't understand it yet. And is that the most efficient way for him to go about, building the superhighway or solving the problem? So when they are at that point where they already have a vision in mind, it's a little harder to sell them something. The only way that we can sell them is to help them find some ideas maybe that they didn't have. But first, we got to kind of explore the vision and how they see themselves. Why do they want to do that? What do they hope to accomplish by that? Does that make sense?
It does. It does make sense. What I recommended was he's selling at the wrong level, where he needs to go higher for someone who actually cares about, hey, why am I paying for a 20-lane highway when I could be using a 2-lane highway? Would that be a good recommendation, bad recommendation? Would you go over someone's head to get that done?
If necessary, yes. I mean, I think that becomes a very strategic decision about the account. Is there other business we can get from the account? Because if we go over somebody's head, which I've done it myself, from time to time, but it is a gamble because we do run the risk of burning the relationship. So I would say do so if you're certain that, hey, I'm getting nowhere with this person, and if I do burn this bridge, I'm okay with it. But I would always proceed with caution when going over someone. Like I say, I've done it, but I think you have to weigh the risk of that for the long-term relationship.
Okay. So now we understand what a discovery is. We understand what a pain is. How I have some stupid questions, or maybe might be stupid questions, which I think about all the time. Uh, when you go into a face-to-face meeting and there's three customers and myself and my account manager, is there a best way to actually sit around the table? Like everybody talks about how we should intersperse ourselves between our customers. Do you see that being effective? Does it matter?
Well, I mean, I can give you a personal example. I think first off, let's assume the parties don't all know one another. Introductions should be done. I always like to let the customer do their introductions first, and then we can do that. But let's say we're in an active sale environment, and maybe one of the parties is not someone that we know yet. I like to do this, and I just recently did this. For my company, we had a client that was interested in doing some sales training. I was contacted by a marketing director, and so that's where my sales cycle started, was with the marketing director. But I went to visit the company. I had the VP of sales, marketing director, and then I was unaware that the CEO was also going to join us. So the way I did that meeting, because I couldn't predict, who was. I mean, I knew who was who in the zoo, but I didn't know what their motivations were. The way I started the meeting was quick introductions and said what I'd like to do. So I've had a chance to meet with the marketing director thus far, and I know what the marketing director would like to accomplish with the project. But let me ask you, I'd like to go to the other two of you, and I started with the VP of sales and marketing then next, and I went up the chain. I said, what individually do you want to accomplish with this project? And then I went to the CEO, and that allowed me to at least get a perception of what each of them wanted to accomplish, and made sure they were in alignment, and where they weren't, I could at least speak to it and know about it, which helped a lot. So that's what I do personally. Would that work in your situations?
Possibly. I've never been in a situation where I had so many people up the chain come and sit in a meeting, and I pretty much know all of my customers at this point. It's hard to find it's hard to surprise me in a meeting because I've met most of my customers, either because I worked at the company or I just knew them probably before, because of Ottawa as being a small space. But yeah, I think it'll help other folks as well. In terms of actually physically sitting, does it matter where you sit? If it's like next to the customer, facing the customer, everybody talks about how we can actually end up, if we sit next to a customer, it's better than facing a customer or interspersed between customers. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think yes, and I think you just have to be careful. I think there's a lot of cultural things that go into that. So I think that very much depends on where you are in the world. Even here in the U.S., I think that would matter greatly where you are in the United States. For instance, I live in Kentucky, so I'm kind of where the Midwest and the States meets the South. So what you would do culturally here would be very different than what you could do in New York City or Los Angeles. So I just think you have to be careful. You don't want to you don't want to make a customer uncomfortable. I think you just got to be very careful about how you do personal spacing. And I've heard the talk about you don't want to put something in between the customer. We want to be interspaced. I find the interspacing and things like that work a lot better over a dinner type of deal where we're trying to interject and get conversations. For a business meeting, I say let the customer decide. When you walk in the room, just let them go where they go, and then fill in rather than try to dictate that.
Okay. So don't try to squeeze yourself between two customers who are already sitting next to each other.
Yeah, I don't. I think you might make them uncomfortable unintentionally, and then you get the meeting started off in a way that you really didn't want it to begin, but by having them kind of backpedaling from the start. We want them to feel free and open, and it needs to feel very consultative so that they feel open to share, what their business issues are. We've got to have trust, and I think trying to insert ourselves in between two people makes them less trusting, because they're kind of like, hey, what's going on here? Why is this person sitting in between us all of a sudden? It seems strange.
Right. Okay. Makes sense. I wouldn't want, if I was a customer, I would prefer to face whoever I'm talking to versus having to look to my side every once in a while.
Well, me too. And I mean, I think some of it depends on, what kind of presentation are we doing? Is this something where we're going to be whiteboarding things? Is this something where we're, flip charting? Are we PowerPointing? Or is this just a conference table discussion? So I think those things also dictate a lot, of how we behave.
Okay. Next question is about if you were to meet a customer. I usually prefer having a notebook in front of me just because I feel it opens the space between me and the customer. A lot of people use laptops. Have you seen a difference in the way customers deal with people who use laptops versus notebooks?
So here's the thing. I would start out every meeting with my computer down. If you have it out, I think it's great. But I think you start out with a notebook and you ask questions, and then, if appropriate, if there's something on the laptop that is relevant, I think then you might, pull up the laptop and go to whatever is important. But I think there's just a natural tendency, especially nowadays on the customer's part, to just see the laptop and immediately be like, oh my Lord, I got to look at somebody's PowerPoint again. So I think, again, just to get the right mental engagement, I think your focus needs to be fully on the customer at first, not on whatever presentation it is you're trying to make on your laptop.
So some people use their laptops to take notes. Does that?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
That to me is kind of lazy. I mean, I get it because it's but that's really all about you. It's saving you time later if I type in my notes. So it may save you 5 minutes later from transcribing your notes. But in reality, you're going to have to go back and edit those notes anyway. So why not, put a final version right into your computer off of your written notes? But that's personal preference. I mean, if you could pull that off, the problem that I think about a laptop, if I'm making notes, I now have put a screen up. I've now put a barrier between me and my customer.
Yeah, that's what I think. And if people don't want to transcribe their notes after, they can use the Evernote app, or if they have a Rocketbook notebook, they can just take a picture of it, and it's searchable. Like it'll actually be able to search for words on a picture, so they don't actually have to transcribe.
There's so much technology available. Yeah, there really is. But I think that you compliment the customer by writing things down. Like the customer is saying, and you are personally writing things down from the customer. You're basically telling them you just said something important to me. I don't know how we buy that back. You know what? I don't know what you're typing. Maybe you're typing a note. Hell, maybe you're typing an email. I can't see your screen. I don't know what you're doing over there. But if we're actively engaged and you're writing down in your notebook something as I say, and then maybe you say, hey, for clarification, I want to make a note on that. Can I ask you to restate that, or I have a follow-up question? It just says you're professional. But more importantly, it says you're listening. And so many people listen to speak and not actively listen to what the customer is saying. They just basically politely stay quiet until they want to make their next point.
Sounds good to me. I like using notebooks and then taking a picture of it after, because then I can share that with my team. Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So for a discovery call, when we first started, the purpose is to, well, at least when you come in, you have prepared with an idea of what the customer might need, and now your goal is to uncover their pain, what the metrics they're measured with, right? So how do you go about doing that?
So here's one of my favorite ways. It's something that I call share a pain. You can try this on, for your listeners, try it this evening or the next time you're out in the social group. If I were to come up, and I teach these classes often, so at the end of the day, we decided, hey, we're going to adjourn, and we've got a group of 7 or 8 people around a bar somewhere, and I say, man, you know what? I've done my...
Tim, you're breaking off a little bit. Do you mind repeating that last sentence?
Yeah. So what I'm saying is, if you get any group of human beings together in a social environment, and you attempt to do what I call share a pain to get a pain. So, for instance, if I say, gosh, I've been teaching all day, I've been on my feet, my back is killing me. one or two people might be sympathetic. Oh, dude, that's terrible. But what's going to happen next is someone's going to tell you about their knee pain or their neck pain or, oh my gosh, their migraine headaches. So it starts a circle of pain because human nature, misery loves company. Same with pain. So if I were talking to, I don't know, a network engineer and say, gosh, I was just recently working with a customer and they were having this, it was a heck of a problem on all these network outages. And we were able to get that under control. It was really something. My hope is maybe they'll say, oh, really? We're not really having network outages, but we're having this other issue. Or I can offer up what we call a menu of pain, where I might offer up 3 potential pains. I deal with VPs of sales, so I might tell a VP of sales, we've been working with other communications companies for, the last 12 years, which establishes my credibility. And so, I'm here. Inability to meet their revenue goals. What the problem again?
Yeah, just I'm going to try to switch to another Wi-Fi, I guess.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No.
Good?
I think we're good right now. Yes.
So bottom line is, if you begin to really understand the 3 highest priority pains for each title that you speak to, by sharing some pains of another customer, they may then feel more comfortable to open up to you.
So
what's going on with them.
Are you sharing like the pain your company is going through, or you just mentioned another customer's pain?
Yeah, I like to mention another customer, particularly if it's one that I've impacted to a positive. So within the solution selling methodology, we have something that's called a client success story. So it's something that's a relatable success story that we've had to that title. Or if I'm just cold calling into a situation, this is all about having to know your industry. But if I were working with a project manager and I was talking to them just off the cuff, it's a lunch thing. Hey, let me ask you something. I'll get your opinion. The top 3 things I'm hearing from other project managers lately are A, B, and C. What do you think? What affects you guys, here at this company? And all of a sudden, I've just opened the door for them. If I know my industry and I know that the top 3 things we normally deal with at this title level are those things, there's a good chance one of those things is going to resonate with this person. And if not those, hopefully by sharing some issues that other customers are having, they're willing to open up about their issues.
So you mentioned that, like, you do that over lunch. Do you do that in a discovery meeting as well, like in a formalized official setting?
Yes. As a matter of fact, if you go from our standard best practices, one of the things we do early in a meeting after introductions is many times we may share a relevant client success story. Hey, one thing that you all may be interested in is that, we recently were working with another communication company that was having whatever we think the high level pain is. And, they felt the reasons were this, and they said they needed a way to do that. We provided that capability, and the net result was, something that paid off that pain, something that happened to the good that would resonate with that potential client. And the hope is at that point, then they say, well, that's an interesting story. We don't really have that problem. We have something else. Or, what? Wow, that's spot on. We've had that issue. Let's talk about that. That's the hope.
And is that a template that you use at every discovery meeting, where this is how I'm going to start off with?
Yeah. So I think it's very important. I'm not a big fan of scripts per se, but the technique, putting it in your own words, making it live for yourself. The technique works, and the technique is to be able to somehow get out and share some pain to try to get a pain on the table. Because from there we can begin to diagnose the pain. But if we can't get pain on the table, relatively early from the client, we're going to really struggle to have a meaningful conversation. We're going to unfortunately then be falling back on hey, let me boot up my 175 slide deck. You tell me what interests you. So we got to find pain to be able to find a solution that's going to resonate.
Okay, so you shared the story, you shared the pain. Is there anything else you do after, or that usually leads to finding the pain and digging deeper into the pain?
Right. Yeah, because next is going to be, we're really going to do a diagnosis on the pain, and then the backside of diagnosing the pain is we we want to then come out with a buying vision that hopefully is biased to what we have to offer.
So they told you the pain. How is that you just built a vision based? Like they already told you the pain. So how do you build a vision based on
Well,
that?
remember, I have the pain, and that's great. That's where I start. But now that's when the discovery begins. Discovery doesn't really truly begin until after I've identified a pain. So there's a discovery piece to get to a pain, but then there's really the true diagnosis piece is once the pain's on the table, now I really have to diagnose what's causing it. Because we tend to solve pains. It's kind of like a medication. We resolve symptoms, the pain goes away. And it's very similar in the business world. We generally, if I've got a vice president of sales that's got declining revenues or isn't missing revenue targets, there's not much I can do specifically about that, but the reasons might be poor training of the sales force and so forth. So I've got to dial into the reasons, and then when I make those reasons go away, then the pain goes away.
So I feel like this might be a common thing in the sales community. I definitely did this before I read the books and attended the training. Is that once I discovered the pain, I figured my job is done, and now I have to come back with a solution, right? But what you're saying is that your job is not done. Now is when you have to
just beginning.
Yeah. So now you don't have to provide a solution in this meeting, but you have to allow the customer to envision how your solution can help them. Is that accurate?
That's correct. We refer to that as diagnose before you prescribe. And the more experienced we get, we tend to the second we have a pain, we just want to jump right to solution. And we haven't done enough discovery, because there's a journey of discovery that we need to go through with the client to fully understand the breadth of the problem so that we can offer the best solution. It's kind of that, you know what, I've seen that 100 times, Mr. Customer. Let me tell you how it's solved. And it's the concept of watching a movie. No one likes to be told how the movie ends. If you spoil a movie for someone, they're not going to like you very much. So the whole discovery process is allowing them to see their own movie before telling them how it ends.
So based on that, I can tell you that my wife does not like me, because the only movie I have not spoiled for her, or a TV show I haven't spoiled for her, is Game of Thrones. Have you ever seen that? It's
you haven't ruined that one for her. Of everything that could be ruined, you held back on that one.
I held back on that one. It was the Red Wedding episode. I'm not gonna spoil here, but if anyone's interested, you should watch that. And I took a video of her.
Yeah. Don't ruin it for all your listeners now.
No, so that's the only part I didn't spoil for my wife. So she doubly hates me, because that's the one she wanted spoiled, so she wouldn't watch it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, we're still married though, so that's good.
Well, I heard the 5-hour car trip with the little one, so
yeah.
So I figure that's working out well.
Yeah, it's working out well.
I know that we're coming up on your time limit for the podcast, but what other things would you like to discuss in our time here? And if there's a good response from the listeners and you want me to come on in a future date, I'd be happy to do so.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So we pretty much, maybe the next time we can talk about how we can actually build that vision. We did discuss it a little bit, but we didn't. It's kind of hard to talk about a lot in 15 minutes. So I'm gonna move on to what I call the not so fire round, which is some of the questions I ask all my guests, and if you have time, we can do that, or we can do it next time.
Sure.
Okay. So other than a notebook and a pen, we already agreed that we should use a laptop. What is an essential tool an SE or a salesperson should be using?
Essential tool, social media.
Really? Like for in what sense?
So I think you should be in social media sharing pertinent information that reflects your thought leadership, reflects problems that you've solved for customers, relevant, maybe sharing relevant articles and industry publications that support your knowledge level and potentially as a thought leader. So I think those are important. for myself, I don't like to overwhelm my followers with things, so it's only once a month, and on some months it might be twice a month, but something that I think might be relevant to them, or some level of accomplishment that would further enhance our company's reputation as a leader in the industry.
To clarify, like, are you writing articles or are you sharing articles written by somebody else or some accomplishments written?
I tend to be so busy that I generally will share other pertinent articles, or just simply, sometimes it's just occasionally it's blatant, but, I do a lot of work in the medical device industry, and there was just notification of the 10 largest medical device companies. And so on our company page, we just put out that it had been a privilege to already work with 3 of the 10 in 2018. So that does a few things for me. One, it lets all my medical device followers know that, you know what, and just this year, we've already worked with 3 of the top 10 industry leaders here, which I don't think there's another company out there in the sales training world that could say that. So it's a brief, just quick snippet that reminds people of what we do and that we're doing it at the highest level.
And do you do it yourself, or do you have a marketing person to do it for you?
I do 85% of it myself, and probably 15% through a marketing company.
Okay. And if you could recommend one platform that everybody should be using today, because there's a lot of social media platforms out there.
Yeah, I think the most relevant to us in business is LinkedIn. So I'm a big fan of LinkedIn. It's changed over the years. At one time, it was thought if you had a LinkedIn profile, you were probably looking for a job. That's just not the case anymore. I think it's probably the biggest business exchange of information that exists today, particularly if you dial into some of the groups and specific groups in your industry and things of that nature. I think there's a lot of very, very valuable information on LinkedIn today.
Sounds good. I use LinkedIn for this podcast and my blog posts as well. All right.
Excellent.
So is there a book or resource, online resource or otherwise, that every SE or salesperson should be subjected to or reading?
I like the subjected to. I personally like our book, the new solution selling. It's getting a little bit older now. Was written, I think, about 2004. But it really gives you the background of all of this information. And if you read the new solution selling, there's a follow-up to it called the new solution selling field book, which then further expands and enhances that. I think that's a great place to start, particularly if you're wanting to learn about vision and differentiation. Really looking at pain and solving problems versus selling products. I think that's one of the best that's ever been written.
Right. So the new solution selling is one of my recommended books on my site. I have not looked at the field book. Is it more like an exercise book where you write stuff into it, or is it just?
It can, yeah. So it allows the solution selling to come to light. So there's it's almost like taking the course a second time, but at your own pace.
Okay, sounds good. So that is a recommendation for everyone to get themselves subjected to, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Any tips or tricks for time management and task organization?
Oh man, I just think you have to be vigilant. There are so many time management courses out there. I wouldn't have a specific one. I don't use a specific one myself. I think it's just, over 30 years of being in business, I've gotten pretty strong about managing my time. If we talked earlier in this podcast about busy work and stuff like that, and at this point, I no longer do busy work. I don't have time for it. If it's necessary, I do it, and if it's not, it gets delegated or it doesn't get done.
Sounds good. Any advice you would give a sales engineer that you feel they don't get from anybody else?
Well, I think that it's important for sales engineers to, and I think generally the employers aren't great at this, but understanding where in the sales process you fit in. And understanding the whole process from start to finish, even though some of those areas aren't your responsibility. But I think understanding the big picture so you really appreciate how important your role is into it, And then the second thing is, in many ways, it's the most important role because the customers really trust you maybe more than the account managers because you're closer to their world. You really, truly understand their problems better. You're the subject matter expert. And I think that also allows you to probably find more opportunities within the organization than an account manager could because you're just closer to it.
All right, sounds good. And that brings me to the end of this podcast. So you mentioned that you have your website, uptrendpartners.com.
Yes. So if anyone is interested in making contact, uptrendpartners.com is our website. You can search me on Google. If you search Tim O'Connor, Sales Performance International, or Tim O'Connor Uptrend Partners, you'll find me there. People are welcome to link in with me. My personal email is timo@uptrendpartners.com. More than happy to take emails as well. And I know we've stayed in connection since the training class via LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn probably 3 times a day, so that's always a very effective and easy way to find me.
And so most of the training you do is for companies. You don't do personalized training for individuals?
So I can do some individual coaching, and we also, if the company doesn't provide any kind of sales training internally, we also do open courses throughout the year where individuals can attend along with individuals. It's disparate, where the various companies come from, but it's a way to learn solution selling as well. And right now, I know I'm planning one of those in early October in Louisville, Kentucky. So if you've ever wanted to come and see where the bourbon is made or the Kentucky Derby is run, early October might be a chance to come and go through the solution selling training.
Nice. And I just want to clarify, I'm not affiliated with you. I'm not getting paid for this. But I do highly recommend your course, and specifically, I enjoyed the training with you. So for whatever that's worth to everybody listening, reach out to Tim if you're interested in the course. All right. Well,
hey, thanks for having me today. I really appreciate it, and I hope it's been helpful.
It's been helpful to me. It kind of reinforced a few things, and hopefully it's helpful to others. I'm sure it is. And I appreciate your time, Tim. I know you're busy. You don't want to be doing busy work, so hopefully this. I'm pretty sure this wasn't because you're actually doing it. So,
Well, it's my pleasure, and thanks again for inviting me onto the show.
My pleasure. Thank you, and we'll talk to you later.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, Tim, for your time. I can only imagine what it's like to own your own company while being a salesperson for your company while doing training for your company as well. So you must be really busy, and I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate you guys listening as well. So thank you guys as well for being here. Thank you for choosing to spend your time with me. And I really hope you enjoyed it and got a few ideas that you'd be able to actually implement in your own day-to-day activities. I know it's hard to take an idea and start doing it. We need practice. Like everything else we do, it just starts off awkward. But the more and more we do it, and then we can observe what the actual results are, we can tweak it to our strengths and abilities. And we have to get started somewhere. So let me know actually what was the most useful thing on this podcast for you. And speaking of useful, if this podcast in general, all the episodes or most of the episodes have been useful to you, and you want to stay up to date on the latest podcasts, blog posts, or anything that I'm doing in terms of webinars, which hopefully I'll be doing soon, subscribe to the newsletter. And you can also share the posts on LinkedIn, because I put these posts out on LinkedIn. So if you're not following me on LinkedIn, do that and like, share, retweet on LinkedIn. I don't know what that means, but you get what I'm trying to say, hopefully. So that's it. If you want to rate and review the show on iTunes or Google Play or whatever, please do so. I will not hold it against you if you do. And that's it for me. So I'll see you guys next week. And with that, this is Ramsey signing off.